Hey, it's Jeff. A little heads up on this episode. First time I've ever done this, but a little parental discretion may be wise. Of course, there's no graphic content in this episode, but we are talking about a sensitive subject that can be very destructive and damaging. I'm talking with a dear friend who suffered as a drug addict for many years. We are talking about opiates, drug addiction in this episode. So just a quick heads up so you know what's coming. If this episode helps even one person or one family struggling with this, it was all worth it. I hope you enjoy and share with a friend or someone that you know that is struggling with addiction in any form or fashion.
I can promise you this, from having dealt with hundreds of people who struggle and having struggled myself, no one sets out to be a drug addict. I can promise you, because it's not, no one wants to do that.
Yeah.
And people want to get out and but they don't know how. Mm-hmm. And being able to, love that person, having compassion for those people, seeing that they're struggling, I think is something that we can all strive to do. As you were saying, having compassion for each other.
This is Jeff Burningham, and welcome to the Extraordinary Us podcast, where I talk to friends about life, good things, hard things. Today, we're going to talk about some hard things, and I'm excited to talk to my good friend, Sean Cortese is here today.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me, man.
I'm glad for you to be here, Sean. Let me remind you a little the purpose of the podcast. Number one, no matter our differences, and we're all different. Sean has good hair, I don't. I mean, there's just differences galore. No matter our differences, and they go a lot deeper than that, whether it's, religious or political differences, there is always a lot more alike. We always have a lot more alike in common than we do different. Like, we're fellow travelers. Would you say that's true, Sean?
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about your journey a little bit today. Number one. Number two, because we are fellow travelers and all struggle in different ways and have more in common, let's exercise compassion. Less comparison, more compassion. And third, and this definitely has a lot of applicability to what we're going to talk about today. Let's act in faith, not in fear. Too often we let mistakes of the past, which we're going to talk about, and fear of an unknown future cloud our judgment and help us to make bad decisions. Have you ever felt that before, Sean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was the basis of what we're going today is that, and forgiving yourself for those past and not fearing the future. That's everything.
Yeah.
That's everything.
I love that. So let me tell you a little background about Sean. Sean and I have been good friends for, Sean, how long has it been? Has it been 20 years?
Yeah.
And I'll just say, I was Sean's bishop when he was a young man,
yes,
a priest,
he
was in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We both grew up in that regard. And I was Sean's bishop, and we were friends. We had a lot of fun experiences together. And we've stayed in contact even after we left some. But Sean's been struggling for the last decade. I'm just going to use round numbers here. And has struggled with some drug addiction. And I thought that this would be an important conversation to have, both for those that are maybe struggling and or parents that have children that are struggling or they're worried about. Another reason, and then we'll jump into it, Sean, is, as I ran for governor, like I traveled all around the state. I didn't understand what a problem the opioid epidemic is and how bad opiates are and how addictive they are. Like, I just it hadn't been totally in my view until I ran for governor. And then I saw it up close and personal. So this is an important topic today. We're going to talk about addiction. We're going to talk about drug abuse, and we're going to talk a little bit about Sean's story. So do you mind if we go back? Like, you kind of grew up normal Provo kid. I mean, obviously every family has its unique quirks. Sean has a great brother that we'll talk about, I'm sure, and two great parents. But would you say your upbringing, was fairly just kind of typical, normal Provo, Utah?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like it was typical. We grew up in the, same ward, from when we moved here, I was 8. So, I mean,
Okay.
right as we moved here, I was baptized right at 8 and then was in the same ward, same house, all the way through high school.
Yeah, it's still there, same neighborhood.
Yeah, still same neighborhood. My parents are there. And
Where did you move from? I guess I didn't know.
oh, yeah. So we were originally in Salt Lake. Then we moved to Montana for a year where my dad had a job for 1 year. And then we moved to that house in Provo.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and I met Sean, I don't know, when you were in your teens, maybe young teens, and then I became your bishop when you're in your older teens. Obviously, a bishop, for those that don't have context, is kind of a pastor or leader of a congregation of, hundreds of members of the church. And then they also have specific responsibility and duties with like the young men and young women that are growing up in the flock. Do you remember some good times there?
Oh yeah, man. I was just talking with one of our good friends, Josh, the other day, and he was reminding me about when we went to Sand Hollow.
Yeah.
And just going on the boats. I mean, going out there. We did tons of stuff. Played basketball. I mean, we must have played basketball. You and I have played ball so much over the years. I mean,
how's your game?
Oh, it's shoddy. I just barely started getting back into it the last couple weeks, and oh man, I got old quick. like it was like 35 is a lot different than 25, and especially when you're taking that time off, man. Getting out of bed the first time after I played, man, I felt like I was 70.
Yeah, and just wait till 45, dude. 45 is a lot different than 35. But would you say that your drug addiction, which is what we're going to talk about today, people, do you think that has that contributed? Was that really hard on you? I assume that's really hard physically on you.
Oh yeah, and especially because and I'm not one of these guys who counts down like, hey, I've been X amount of days sober, but I know it's been over a year. It was around Thanksgiving 2021, which was the last time I did drugs, and like I hadn't done anything physical in years, and that I was big into sports, every sport, football, basketball. Like I would have never imagined that this would happen to me because I was so athletic and into that stuff. But yeah, having like now trying to come back, oh man, like I think, and that's part of why like my body getting back into that physical stuff, it hurts. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's like seeing just being, at this age anyway, you're not like you were in your 20s, but man, I think my body is just, it doesn't recover quick.
Yep. One of the saddest days ever that I had as a bishop, and you usually serve for about 5 years, but a friend of Sean and mine who was, what was he, maybe young to mid-20s, passed away from a drug overdose. Yeah. And I was a very young, I probably was only 5 years older than him. I was like late 20s. And I officiated at his funeral. Yeah. And I'm not going to say his name for the family's sake, but I just remember the devastation in the family. And you remember this guy. He played basketball with us too sometimes.
Yeah, I was at the funeral. I was there and knew his family well. Yeah. My brother was really close with him too, like with his family and just.
So it was heartbreaking.
Oh, it was devastating.
So Sean, you have that example right in front of you. So what happened? And I think it kind of started with opiates, right?
It was.
So talk to us about it.
So this is exactly that. So my brother we were living together. I had just graduated college and he was in college and we were living together. And he separated his shoulder playing basketball. Just popped out and separated it. And so they couldn't go in and fix it right away. So they took him to the ER. They gave him some pain meds, popped it back in, but he was going to have to do shoulder surgery. So he was laid up for weeks before, then he got the surgery and was just laid up and he was getting, pain medication for it. Yeah. And after, he did the surgery and it healed and it was good. And I had never experienced, I never saw even with the friends I hung out with in high school, never saw drugs, drinking, any of that, was never even into it anywhere near that. And so the time went on and one night he'd gone on a date. So I was home alone. House needed to be cleaned. I don't know what I was thinking, right? I opened up the cabinet and there were still some pills in there. And I was like,
So you knew what they were.
Yeah.
You knew their kind of what they could potentially do. Or, yeah.
And I was thinking, I was like, I had never done any drug at that point, anything. No, and so I was just like, like I'm by myself, I'm bored. We need to, like, what am I going to do? Like, he's on a date, I'm by myself. Like, what do I, so I just was like, oh, let's see what happens. So I took one, and these were strong. This is Oxycontin. And these are very, like, really strong painkillers. And I had never, like, right as I took it, and it's like an immediate release pill. And right as I took it, it was like, boom, like and I grew up, and when I grew up, I had some anxiety issues and things like that. I mean, that I didn't understand until my later adult life.
Yeah.
But when I took that, man, it was like, boom, I just, like, my mind calmed down. And then and I was just like, everything relaxed. And it was like, and then you get this euphoric feeling. Like, I described this to you, like, before, when we were talking earlier about, like, if you could bottle the greatest feeling that you've ever had in your life, you think about that, when you take that pill, that's what it feels like. It's like complete and utter euphoria. And so I felt that, and I was like, whoa, holy,
so you were like addicted immediately, or
instantly.
like instantly?
Instantly.
And that's not how you feel when you come off of it, when you try to quit. No.
Oh, no.
Yeah, like, and I think that's how a lot of people actually start, is there's extra unused pills, whether it's parents' unused pills or whatever, painkillers. That's kind of how it starts, right?
Yeah.
I think. And so be careful with those, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I heard stories like this when I travel around Utah and talk to parents whose children had passed away or were struggling with addiction to drugs. It often started with, like, some extra pills that were just laying around, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then there was not to get too into this, but I mean, there was it was Purdue Pharma who pushed these pills, and they were prescribing them at massive rates. I mean, this was what made with the addiction hard, because there were a couple of pills left. Tony didn't have a ton of them, but I took it and it felt awesome. And then I took the next day, it wasn't like I did it every day right after that, but, like, they were still in there, and I took a few more as the weeks went on. And then it was like, whoa, this is awesome. And then some of the people I was hanging out with, it wasn't everybody had them. That was the insane thing, is it was like all, like,
people could get them easily.
People could get them easily. Everybody had a prescription at this time. This is probably like 2014, I would say, at least 2014.
So 8 years ago.
Yeah, 8 years ago.
It's harder now, right?
Oh yeah, they've locked a lot of it down, and they've shut it down. But it's really, really hard to get them now, and that creates another problem, because you get addicted to the pills, and then it's like,
and then where do you go?
And this is what happened to me. So, I was from about 2014 to 2016, 17, it was easy to get pills. And I was, at this time too, I was in business school, I'm studying to be in finance.
So you're totally functioning, by the way. I mean, are you or not?
Yeah,
Is this an illusion in your mind? Or do people think, oh, Sean's just normal himself?
So to me, I think that it's like, I'm taking these, and it's like, I think I'm just killing it, because you're feeling great. You're just, like, walking around, and you're just like, yeah, this life is awesome. Like, it's like, life feels awesome. And then, like, but as it gets progressively worse, you have to start taking more. And then I didn't understand that you get very sick coming off these, because your body becomes dependent on them. Mm-hmm. And so, but I didn't understand that yet. So I'm like, if I didn't have enough, I'd get sick. And I was like, man, I've got this flu, like, and you're violently sick. Ooh. Like, I mean, it feels like.
So you didn't understand that you were not
yet. I was like, but I was just like, why can't I get better? But, like, I take the pills and I feel good. And luckily at the time, like, well, not luckily, but I was making good money. And so I was able to, find ways to get them, and they're expensive, but it was like, you're not really thinking about that. It's like, okay, I need these, they're helping me. But then,
is that lucky or unlucky that you had the cash to do that? I guess it depends.
I mean, you could take it on either way, because it was like, it held off from me getting desperate.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was just burning through cash. And so anyway, like, I thought I was functioning well, but then, a mutual friend of ours who I worked for, he was a mentor to me, and a guy I idolized. Like, I idolized him.
Yep.
And he brought me aside, and he's my boss, and came in. He's like, dude, what's going on? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, you're like, I'm getting these reports, and we're filling out, and these are people's finances, like, financial documents, like stock market, all their life savings. And I'm, running these reports. He's like, dude, this is like basic stuff. You're missing on like this. And he like goes to me and I'm like, oh, I don't know.
I'm bad at math.
Yeah. At first it's like, I don't know.
You were making excuses.
Yeah.
At first,
making excuses at first. And so, because I didn't want to let him down. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, then I realized I got a real problem here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, because I can't, I can't go off of the pills. And then I realized, so then I start doing some research and realize, withdrawal, and it's like withdrawal when you come off because your body becomes dependent on these. And that's the scariest thing about opiates, like with other drugs, like a marijuana, say, I mean, you could do that and you're not going to get violently sick. Even if you were a long time user, you're not going to get violently sick. But with these, oh man, it feels like you're tied up to a car battery and you are sick for weeks.
Wow.
Like if you
coming off.
Yeah. I mean, cold sweats. It's awful.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your courage, Sean, in telling your story. I think it's important. That's why I'm having you on today. You sought me out to be on this podcast. I did. Why? Tell me and tell our listeners why. Like, why is this so important to you now? Why? Obviously, you're, by the way, Sean is an aspiring actor. He was just in an independent film. There's more coming up. That will be an interesting journey. Yes. Maybe we'll talk about that, later on. But, and you've been clean, like you said, for, well over a year now. But why did you seek me out? And, why?
What's crazy is so around Christmas this last year, I got this feeling like you should share your story, like make this a positive. Because there was a point in time where I didn't think I was coming back. Like
you didn't think you were going to live.
No, I didn't. I cashed it in. It was like, I'm not going to make it.
In fact, you thought like, and I'm not trying to put this is from our conversation. Yeah, you thought like the best alternative or the alternative for me is to die.
Yeah.
To just, right?
Absolutely.
You got to that point.
I got to that point. And in 2020, especially, with the pandemic and everything was locked down, I wasn't working. I had lost my job. I lost that job in finance that I'd worked so hard to get to drugs. And so I got this feeling, though, that was like, I should share my story. I got clean by miracles and many miracles and many special people that you and I know and that have stuck with me, and so grateful to them. But yeah, so I got this feeling and I was like, I should share my story. And I was like, at first I was like, no. Like, I don't want to out myself. I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk about it. No, but it kept coming back. And so I was like, well, what would be the best way to do this, to get it to also to not be preachy about it, but to make a positive spin and help. And I had seen my therapist, who you and I both know. He's been on this podcast, Paul George, who is a saint of a man. Yeah. He, I saw that and he's helped me so much. And I was like, you know what? That's the best way to get it out there, to get out there and really, and also I trust you and we have a relationship. And so it's like, we can share this and help other people who maybe are struggling, who don't understand it, to put it out there and just give people a chance to see. And also from someone who dealt with it firsthand for 8 years, give someone a chance and explain that it's not something to be ashamed of, and to bring awareness to it. And
yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. I think those are good reasons, right? Yeah. So that is the purpose of the podcast today, is to bring awareness, to educate, and to tell a little bit more about the story. So it started with opiates, but it got worse, or, I don't know exactly how to talk about this or describe it. I haven't had a lot of firsthand experience, but so there came a point where you couldn't get those anymore. Yeah. Is that correct? And then it got worse.
Oh, much worse.
And is that often what happens with?
Yeah. I mean, I've had, and when you start hanging out in those crowds and dealing with those people, you see what happens, because the pills, there people were dying, lawsuits and all that stuff with the prescription pills. So that dries up, and then it's like, well, I'm still addicted and I got to find another way to do it. And I'm sick. And it's like, and your mind changes. They have an effect on your mind, and you can't feel joy. You can't. It messes with all the levels in your mind, and so So then it was next was. Well, actually, I'll say, so first I wanted to quit so badly and I couldn't stop. So I went to a doctor who can give you a shot that blocks the opiate from working in your mind. So I was like, so I was trying that, but it was just, I didn't feel anything and I was still addicted. So then it was like, I can't.
So that didn't work.
No, not for me.
But it does for some people.
Yeah, it does. I have a few friends that it worked for and they were able to do it, but I was just like still dealing with other things in my life and wanting to bury these feelings. And so I found someone I started using cocaine, and that was because I used that for a little while until, I stopped getting the shot. It was like, okay. And then I went back and then, graduated to heroin use. And it was,
so you're in some dark places.
Oh, it was so bad.
Do your loved ones know this is happening? Like, how much do they know of what's going on when this is going on? Yeah,
so my parents definitely knew, and in the beginning, I had told them, and
so you told them?
Oh yeah, I told them early on. It was like I got a drug problem, and they were like, but they didn't know what to do with that. They're like, we grew up, and they were like,
Happy Valley,
and then they're looking at me like, you like, well, how did this happen? Like, how did this happen? And I'm like, step by step. And then you find yourself in just these desperate situations. And so it was, I never expected to go there. And my family was extremely concerned and very supportive in the beginning, let's get you help. Let's do this. And they but then it was like, I wasn't ready to quit.
Yeah, you had to decide.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. Is it was like, I'm doing all the things, but also in your mind, the back of your mind, you're like, well, because this is a crutch for me. It's like a safety net, and so you can go a little bit of time. And I'd made strides and stuff, but there was still that little bit, and I was sneaking it, and I mean, at a point they started to take it personal. That was like, Sean just doesn't care about us, or he's selfish, or and those are true. It was absolutely true. I was drug addicted, and I loved my family, and I didn't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
But the shame of that, it was like, I don't know how to stop. I can't stop. And so I felt ashamed and was embarrassed, and it was like, oh man.
As you look back now, first of all, real quick, do you feel like you still feel the effect in your mind, or do you feel clean and clear now, or do you feel like I did some permanent damage that's like not coming? How do you feel? I'm just curious.
I mean, it's progressively gotten better, and it's taken a long time.
Okay, so the fog keeps lifting.
Every day the fog lifts more and more, but definitely, like, I mean, for the first 6 months or so, like I didn't feel like how you feel joy and happiness and stuff. It was like I'd messed with I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but it's like, the serotonin in your brain does because it's not. It's being artificially created, and it was like to get that to fire again took a long time, and it's still not all the way back. But I mean, it slowly, it's working its way back. But I've done some damage. There's no doubt about it.
Have you guys heard of Under Your Bed? I bet you have by now. If you're listening to the Extraordinary Us podcast, I bet you've searched for it maybe and haven't been able to find it.
It's true.
Isn't that how life is sometimes? You just can't find what you're searching for. Constantly searching.
Well, now you can.
Now we've been found. Under Our Bed is finally out. It's really there, people. So type it in right now. Search it up.
You're going to love it.
Look for it live, subscribe, and tell your friends. Can't wait to have you there with Jeff and
Sal,
providing the comedy relief. Good night, Sal.
Good night, Jeff.
So you look back now as a clean dude. Congrats, man.
Thank you so much.
Man, I'm glad it's working out. What happened, Sean? Like, I mean, you told a little bit of the mechanics of like how it happened, which I think is important, by the way. It's a very innocent thing. There's some extra pills laying around, whatever. You're cleaning the house or stumble upon them, whatever happens. And then someone decides to use them. That's a slippery slope, or can be one small decision that like takes you in a whole different place. So we spoke about the mechanics, but I'm saying like emotionally, or, like as you look back now, what are your takeaways or learning emotionally, or about yourself, about life, etc.?
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, my takeaways is as I had touched on a little bit before, I was, had high anxiety all through high school, all through, growing up. And then having that, it was like, I didn't like some of the decisions I'd made growing up. I felt like I'd missed out on things because of my anxiety, because of things. And so I beat myself up, the way I talked to myself, the way it was like, I didn't have a good self-worth, a good self-base for that, and so when I found the drugs, it was like, oh man, now I numb out. I don't have to feel anything. I don't have to deal with those things. I don't have to have responsibility. I don't have to. And in order to, what I was luckily able to find was that, I went back and it started in therapy, and I started talking about those things that I didn't like about myself, that I didn't want to deal with, tough things from my childhood that, of not believing in myself, and found out that going back to those places, which hurts, like it hurts to go back there. Nobody wants to do that. And as a man, you'd rather like go outside and just dig a hole than go to therapy. Like anything but therapy. Like knock
your head against the pole.
Like I don't want to go there. I don't want to get emotional. No, I'm tough. I can handle it. But once I got in there and like dug that up, it was like I was able to finally find a way to feel compassion to my younger self. And it was like, look, the kid was doing the best he could. And this didn't work out. And you didn't, this didn't work out. And this relationship didn't work out. But like, I was finally able to realize that was a huge reason why I was using drugs.
So you're able to forgive yourself?
Yeah. I was finally, and it took a long time. And I didn't like myself for most of my life, which is sad to admit, but it was the truth. Finding that realization to forgive myself was probably the biggest reason I was able to stop, was because I was like, I wasn't ashamed anymore. It was like, that kid did the best you could. You've done the best you could. Like, life doesn't always go the way you want it.
Yeah. So that was your gateway. To giving it up.
Yeah.
Because that's hard, right? Like, how did you decide to stop, and why? It's because you forgave yourself.
Yeah.
You weren't kind of self-loathing. You'd accepted who you were. You'd accepted your decisions and knew that you could go forward in a more positive manner. I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but like, give us, like, how did you find the strength and courage to give it up?
I mean, it was a long process. About 6-7 years in, it was like, okay, I've really got to, and because I had a good support system and people who have stuck with me, but it was I've found that, and this is with I've listened to a lot of people who've struggled with addiction, and a lot of people who've said that the hardest thing isn't stopping the drugs, it's the decision to stop. And once you make that decision, it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm done feeling this pain. I'm done working this 80-hour-a-week job that all it does is take my money and give me nothing in return.
Does it feel like a job?
Oh yeah, drug addiction. You wake up in the morning and that's all you care about.
It's like game on. It's like, how am I going to get my fix
How am I going to do it? Yeah. Like I had I was supposed to be to work at 8 when I was working in finance, and it was like I'd get up and it was like that was not even on my mind. It was like I got to find a way to get high, get the pills, and then or whatever it was I was using, and get that. And once I did that, then it was like, okay, I'm strolling to work at 11, and it's just like, what are you doing? But you're in this, like,
and you could function.
Yeah. Well,
You thought you were
I
functioning.
thought I was functioning. And in the beginning, yeah, I'm functioning well enough. But I mean, as it progressively gets worse, I mean, and once you start doing those hard street drugs, you're not functioning. Like, and it's not, and it's definitely not fun like that. And it is because you have to do it. It's a compulsive, addiction is compulsive, doing something that is going to, create a negative consequence, but doing it anyway. And that's what I was doing.
So you went to therapy, you felt all those things, you made the decision to quit, which is the most important thing.
Yeah.
What other resources are, let's say that someone's listening and struggling, or they have children or loved ones that they are struggling with drug addiction or fear they are. Were there other like therapy? You've mentioned a support system, which I think includes your family and some close friends, of which, I know who some of those people are. But what are there other resources that people could look to, or that you found helpful in your either, when you were deciding to give up, or even now as you're trying to stay clean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could always do like, for me personally, this wasn't a big one, but like, AA is one that they do. But
did you try that?
I did for a little while.
But you didn't.
But it didn't. No, because a lot of it is just, at least in my experience, people romanticizing what they, getting up and telling stories of when they used to get high and things like that. And so for me, that wasn't a big one. But like, I think, resources as much as I would say that the best is obviously having a support system, and say like you've got a family member who might be struggling or who is struggling. And the biggest thing to know is that it's not at you. Like, I'm speaking like from personal experience with my parents.
Meaning it's not personal.
Yeah. So like my parents thought for a while.
It's not because of them.
Yeah. For my parents thought that Sean is directly doing this in our face. Like he's because I had to, move home and was with them and still was struggling. And so for a while they thought it was like, he doesn't care. He's doing this despite of us. And it was like, that's not what I'm doing. Like, you're just trying to survive day by day. But when people are able to realize that and give people and love that person, and I know that's hard, like loving an addict is brutal, and watching someone do that, but sticking with them and removing the shame from it. I think that was the biggest thing, was taking away the shame and not hiding it, right? So
what do you mean by that? Like, because it is shameful, right? Like some of your behavior, and we all behave in ways, but like, how did you do that? Sorry, I'm trying to get a little more nuts and bolts. Yeah.
No, yeah. So removing the shame was that I just realized, okay, I have a problem. This is a problem. I'm an addict, and I have to, talk about that, and realize that it's also, addiction is like addiction is like, it's a disease. It is. It's a mental disorder. And when it started to get treated like that, and it took me, going through therapy and dealing with addiction doctors and those kind of things to realize. And when they talked about that and told me, look, you have a disease. And when I started to look at it like that, it was like, oh, wow. Like, I have an addictive personality. I have this is a disease. And when I started looking at it like that, it was able to remove that shame, because it's like, okay, when I was in it, because I never knew how it started. Like, this is not me. I didn't set out to do this. I didn't want to be this person. But when it was like, okay, that was like the light switch moment. It was like, okay, I have a disease. And then when it's treatable, and you go through and depending on, this is opiate addiction, which was my drug of choice. And they were able to, once I realized that, it was like, wow, this isn't all my fault, right? This isn't all my fault. And it was able to perceptibly move through that and be like, okay. And then I was able to go that route and forgive. And
yeah, that's cool. I'm curious. This is a personal question, is your faith, was that like helpful in this? Has that played a role in this? What role, good or bad? I'm curious.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, when I was, at my worst, there were times where I was like, I didn't, I'd always grown up believing in God but at my worst, it was like, I was so far gone. I didn't But to see that I was able to, there were, situations that happened. I never, luckily, I never, like, I'll share this one. So it was like, I went to a Suboxone clinic, which is something you go and they help wean you off of these drugs. And they were talking to me and they said, so how did you, like, how many times, you have to go through this rigorous process. And they talked to me, they're like, how many times have you been arrested? Like, and I said, I've never been arrested. And they were like, well, how long have you been doing drugs? I said, 6 years. And they're like, you don't have to lie here. Like, this is,
we're trying not to lie here.
We're trying not to lie here. Yeah. Let's be honest, pal. And I was like, no, I've never been arrested. I've never, and they're like, and they were like, that's a miracle. Like, I've never seen that. And as I look back on my journey through this addiction, it was like, I saw little places where I could have gotten, arrested, busted, caught. And I just chose to look at it like, wow, that didn't happen to me. And I felt that, okay, when I started to sober up and do that, I started to look at my life like that. And I was like, wow, there was something, there's some like, yeah, it was, I felt, this is just my feeling that God watched out for me for whatever reason. Yeah. And I'll talk to you about this too. Like a lot of times with a decision I did make in my addiction was a lot of people will try to in that world, and it's unfortunate that they'll try to use you to fund their habit, or because you get insanely desperate in those situations. And I have so much compassion for those people who struggle in that. But I made that decision that I was like, I'm never going to involve someone else in this, like, bring someone else in to do that, or, sell drugs to someone else. Like I never did that. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that was like a conscious decision for blessings or anything like that.
You just didn't want to hurt other people.
I didn't, this was my own thing. It was my own way to cope. And I was like, I knew how bad it was. I mean, I was miserable. It was exciting and fun for about 9 months. And then after that, it was a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I knew how bad I was struggling, and I was like, I don't want to involve anyone else in this. And I feel like by not doing that, I feel like that it was because I had compassion for other people and empathy, even in my worst times, that there was, I felt that and because of my compassion for those people and a love of other people, that it wasn't that, I was watched out for and that, watched out for,
Well, I couldn't help but when we kind of reconnected and I knew that you've been struggling, and we've, chatted here and there throughout the years. I didn't know how to help you. And, I had moved away. We're not as close to each other as we were. But, hearing your story, like, I know what a good person you are, like, I know your heart. I know that. And I think that says a lot about you. So my point in saying that is, like, if Sean can get trapped in this, a lot of people can, or everyone can, this, like you said, this wasn't someone looking for it per se, or you just don't have that temperament. You know what I mean? And so, what advice, how do we remove the stigma? Because I think there are a lot of good people that get trapped in various addictions, whether it's drug addiction or otherwise, that, get kind of lopped into the same thing. And then I think hiding it or shame becomes a big part of it, and it perpetuates the addictive cycle. So how do we remove the stigma? How do we best help those that are closest to us that are maybe struggling with addiction?
Yeah, so removing the stigma of it is definitely, I mean, not hiding from it, not keeping it a secret. Say you have, I'm speaking from my own experience, which is all but when I first came and told my parents, hey, I got a drug problem, they were, whoa, like, you have one and no one can know. Like, we've got to keep this, we've got to keep this
which is probably a general natural reaction, but not maybe a good one.
Yeah. There's no game plan on how to, there's no book on how to do it, but they were super couldn't believe it and were super nervous. And then was like, okay, let's not talk about it. Let's not, and looking back now, if someone were to, to do it over, and I've talked with my parents about this, they would have, rather than bury it, take it head on and be like, okay, we got to, what can we do to do this? And also there's no embarrassment in it, for, people, there's addictions in all sorts of things, we're talking drug addiction, but anything you do compulsively or too much, and you see it in society, and this is, not a judgment, but I mean, some people overeat, some people, shop continually or whatever, whatever
your addiction of choice is. Yeah.
Whatever it is. And so, but for whatever reason, and it's obvious because it's illegal, it's harmful, it's, it's destructive, ruins lives, but drug addiction is viewed, where we just talk about like, someone who overeats or shopping or whatever. If drug addiction is viewed as this, shady, when it is a shady world and a tough, but because like you were saying, when you ran for governor, you saw the rampant use and what has happened to people. And now we're having to wake up to the fact that this is a serious problem. I mean, it's an epidemic, and millions of people are affected by it. And just because you struggle with it, that doesn't mean that you're like, a leper now. Because in the beginning, that's how I felt. I felt it was like, I was radioactive. Like people, and then people find out and they can tell, and they're like, I don't want to be around this guy. It's like.
Did you feel like that?
A little bit, some, yeah. Definitely.
I'm sure from some people you didn't, though.
Yeah, from some people I didn't, but there was. I mean, it was obvious I had problems, and it was like, and I did feel that, and I think that kind of behavior towards people who are struggling make them want to not come out and search for help or ask for help. I mean, maybe that, asking for help is another huge thing. Is like,
it's a big step. Yeah.
Big step, and saying like, the first solution to a problem is realizing I have one, and asking for help. It should not be, don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah. This is reminding me so poignantly. I don't count exactly, but I think I've done over 50 podcasts now on The Extraordinary Us. And I think it was like my third, fourth, or fifth, maybe episode 3, if you want to look it up. Guest Joseph Grenny, who's a great guy. He runs the Other Side Academy in downtown Salt Lake, if you've heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
He talked about how he had children that struggled with drug abuse, and he said, we go to church, we overdress, we go to church, and we try to appear perfect to our peers. We try to act like, oh, nothing's wrong, everything's perfect in my world, instead of, this is what he said, and this is what I'm hearing. And there's usually a line or two from every episode that sticks with me, and this sticks with me from Joseph, is instead of saying like, my son's a drug addict, your daughter's a drug addict. Like, how do we actually help each other? Like, drop the charade, like, forget the overdressing, forget the, the over idealization of this idea of perfection, whatever that is. We all have problems, and how do we help each other with problems? So, presumably we're going to church because we recognize the dysfunction in all of us, and we're trying to be healed, or to heal each other, to help each other overcome the challenges of this world. But we miss the mark sometimes, right? It was such a poignant moment. And I love Joseph and the work that he's doing up at TOSA. But anyways, it reminds me of that. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And saying, and that's why I was talking about, just to semi-circle back with the removing the stigma, to say like, and it's fine, but to say, my daughter's a drug addict, and that was a huge thing with me. And then the realizing that this is a, it's like cancer, in a way that it's like, this is a treatable and it's a disease. And so, yes, while, removing, saying, oh, this person's a drug addict. And so now we've got to not be, I don't want to be around them. I don't know how to help. I don't know how to fix it. Like they're like having the compassion of like, this person is struggling and no one, I can promise you this, from having dealt with hundreds of people who struggle, and having struggled myself, no one sets out to be a drug addict. I can promise you, because it's not, no one wants to do that.
Yeah.
And people want to get out, and but they don't know how. And being able to, love that person, having compassion for those people, seeing that they're struggling, I think is something that we can all strive to do. As you were saying, having compassion for each other.
Yeah. How worried are you about relapsing? Like, what is the healthy balance between, I assume that there's a healthy balance between like kind of being paranoid about not going back to that life versus, like not stressing yourself out back into that life or over, like, how do you feel about that? Tell me.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely like, I think, it's cliche, but I mean, you're sober one day at a time.
Yeah.
And I do. And in the beginning, it was so hard, to be like, okay, I've got to, it was on my mind still constantly. Like oh my gosh, like what I wouldn't give, like, just like, I like, how nice would it be to just check out for the day? Yeah. But, and it slowly, now it's not on my mind all the time. I'm not thinking about it all the time, but, I mean, the truth is I have to make that decision that it's like, I know, the thing is that I know how good it would feel to get high again, but I don't want what's on the other side of that.
Yeah.
I don't, because I know where that goes. And I've tried every single way possible to be a functioning drug addict. I wanted to be. It was like, I tried everything to do it. It was like, I can do this. I can do like this. I can keep my job, or I can, do this. And I realized after trying hundreds of different ways, it's like, it leads one way.
Yeah.
And I had to make that, and I realized that and be like, there's no way you can be a functioning human being and be addicted to drugs. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Do you think that we're kind of trading addictions as human beings again on this earth? Like, this is something we spoke about a minute ago that I just took a quick note on. That's just, like you said, I'm going to make something up. I don't think it's true, but like, I could be addicted to ice cream, right? I do like ice cream, but I don't think I'm addicted. But, like whatever it is, like, are you kind of always, I don't know. What did you learn about that? I don't know, not ever having like a prescribed or whatever addiction, to something that was super harmful. But I mean, obviously I could probably eat a little less. I could maybe grow a little more hair. I don't know. There are things I could do better and more of, and I think that's true for all of us. But do you ever feel like that? Because actually I think of you becoming an actor now, which I thought was really interesting and cool. You reached out and told me about that like a year ago, several months ago, and said, hey, I'm doing this. And I was like, wow, that's cool. But that's kind of a rush. That's kind of a, right, in and of itself. You kind of lose yourself. You go into a part. You're playing someone else. You're kind of free from the bondage of life or the whatever. Anyways, what have you thought about that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think in that way, the biggest thing too is to find something that replaces that
unhealthy
addiction. Because I would, you asked me in private a little bit ago, you were like, do you want to get married? And I was like, well, yes, now, but before it was like, I don't need to get married. I, go out and get my drugs and go home. And that's what I was married to.
Yeah.
And it was like, so to find, that's a huge thing. And it took me a long time because, in order to stay sober, it was like, I needed to find something that replaced that hole in my soul that I was trying to fill that is unfillable, especially with that, it's just you repeating the same behavior is. So when I found, being an actor, I think, at least for me, it's another escape in a way to be able to be somebody else. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I need to escape being me anymore.
Yeah.
But there is, for me, it is a different kind of rush. Like, I'm somebody else. I get to create these characters and be anything I want, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe the idea, and again, we're not therapists, we're not doctors. I've never claimed to be any of those things. But like, maybe the idea is to try to trade, obviously a very unhealthy addiction, like with drugs, with something that's more healthy, like being on stage and making people laugh or whatever. Maybe, that's good in a lot of ways. Maybe there are some parts of that aren't good, but it's a lot better than getting high every day, right? And like, so I don't know, maybe there's some wisdom in that and some trade-offs that we just have to accept here. Yeah.
And I know other people who, like, I have a friend who, it's crazy. Like, I had thought about this, someone like you're super successful and have a drive to be successful and achieve those things. As a drug addict, it's like the reverse. It's like, that's what you strive for. And it's like, as hard as you've gone, like that's as hard as I was going at drugs. And so it's like, but I have another friend who he swapped it out and was like, he found this other thing and he channeled that same energy that goes into drug addiction, and he channeled it into building his own business. And he's done it and he's built it up, and it's amazing to see and inspiring. And it was like, he told me, he was like, I just decided that I'm going to, as hard as I went at drugs, it was like, if I channeled that energy into something else, like if I can do what I can do anything. Yeah,
I like that. I mean, maybe that's a great way to look at it. Yeah. Like we've got to put our energy towards something. We are energy. We're made up of energy, as we're alive. We got to channel that energy somewhere, and hopefully we're channeling it to the most positive end possible and to the most positive things possible, right? Yes. But if we don't, by the way, do that, that energy's still there, and it may take us in the wrong direction, or we may channel it towards something that's destructive or harmful. Yeah, I like that idea. It's a good, interesting thought.
Yeah, it was, and I think that. And that's and finding, whatever it is, if you've struggled with that, and in any kind of unhealtly, if you're able to luckily for me, like I found acting. I love it. And I've been lucky enough to find, having moderate to early success in it as I've just started the last year, but finding that and finding something that you are super, we're exactly what we just said, where you can channel that energy and be like, okay, I'm going to go hard at this, and find that was huge in my recovery as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Let me, if I could, Sean, I'm going to do something a little different.
Okay.
I kind of want to sum up, if you can believe it or not, it's already been 50 minutes. I kind of want to sum up our journey a little bit. I want to tell you how I feel about you a little bit, and then take us home. Like, okay. I'll just leave it to you. I think we've spoken about kind of some advice to parents, how you forgive yourself. But if there's something you feel like we didn't cover, if there's something that sparked from what I said, Sean, I've always loved you, man. We had fun together when you were a teenager.
We did.
And you weren't a perfect teenager. There are none. I've got 2 of them in my home right now, and they're terrible half the time. Just kidding. Only like 10% of the time are they terrible. 90% of the time they're awesome. But, and we had our ups and downs, and I knew your struggles, and you're with anxiety. We all have different struggles. You would have never, I was surprised the path that you've been on. You're surprised as well. I would have you probably, looking back, would never say, I want to go through those 7 or 8 years of addiction again. However, you've come out the other side, and you're still young. Life's not over. But I just want to say, like, how proud I am of you, how I've always believed in you. Gosh, we all have struggles, and they may not be as bad or as deep as this, or, as painful or as damaging, but we all struggle. And I'm proud of you, man, for recognizing the dark hole you were in, somehow grabbing yourself by the bootstraps, and probably there were others pulling along, and getting yourself back on your feet, being clean, telling me about it, wanting to share your story courageously, publicly on this podcast. And again, the whole point of this, hopefully this is helpful for someone else. And so anyways, I just want to say how much I admire your story. Again, it's maybe a winding path that we wouldn't choose, but all lives are winding paths in different ways. And I love you, man. I'm glad that you sought me out. I'm glad that you pushed me a little bit. And I'm glad to hear more of your story. Take us home here. Finish us up on this episode where we've kind of spanned the gamut on addiction and these challenges.
Yeah, well, I want to just thank you for having me on and I love your platform of being, the extraordinary us. And And that's the real thing, no matter what it is. I think that in a world that is increasingly tough for everyone, and everybody has their struggles, as you just mentioned, but let's whatever it is, the biggest thing is have empathy for people, love people. If we love each other and notice that everyone is struggling, and sometimes take the chance to think of how the other, if you were in their shoes, and just be a little, if I can say anything, it's just be kind to people.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with people, everybody's struggling in one way or another. And I think that would be the ultimate message that I could send, is just be as kind as you can be to other people, because you never know what someone is dealing with. And if you're just kind, just make the world a better place, not to go, full soft here, but at the same, Mr. Rogers, but at the same time, the world could use a little of that, a lot of that. And that's one thing that I've found that has been if there's anything I'm proudest of in my life, it's that I continue to be kind and empathetic to people. And I would say to anyone who's listening, do that, and you will see your life will improve. The more you give, the more you get back, I have found. And it seems like a paradox, but it's like the more you give, the more you get back. And giving that to people, there's no better feeling.
I love that. Mr. Cortese. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, man.
I know you just wanted to call me Bishop.
Yeah, I almost did. It's still hard to say Jeff. Still weird.
But look for Sean, and if you're looking at this, he looks like Matt Damon. I mean, look at this. You look like Matt Damon, bro. You hear that daily.
I've gotten that a lot.
So,
yes.
Matt's getting older. Look for Sean to replace Matt in the next decade.
Yes.
Can't wait to watch that, man.
Hey, thank you so much, Jeff. I
Thanks,
really
Sean.
appreciate it.
See ya. Hey, guys. It's Jeff. I hope you enjoyed that episode with my friend Sean Cortese. Like I said, we go way back. It made me a little nervous, honestly, when Sean reached out, and I had to think about this for a couple months or whatever, mainly just for two reasons. Number one, I didn't want to glamorize at all, the addiction to drugs. Obviously, I guess there's a glamorous side, quote unquote, of like anything or everything, or most things. But there's also a bad side, and the cost-benefit analysis does not work in your favor, obviously, with any sort of a harmful addiction or addiction to drugs. So I didn't want to glamorize that. The second thing, I didn't want this to be painful to anyone that, friends of mine and people that I love and care about. I hope that it wasn't. I hope that it was uplifting. I hope that it sheds some light. I was a little worried about what, people may think just about the subject matter or content, but who cares? I'm not doing this podcast to please everyone or because I care about what everyone thinks. I'm doing it to hopefully help someone. And if this episode about drug addiction helps even one person or one family, and I'm confident it will help more than that, then it's all worth it. The time that we put into it, producing it and sharing it and doing it is all worth it if it helps one family. Again, it was eye-opening as a gubernatorial candidate in the state of Utah, which, is a very clean-cut, state, and it's certainly thought of that way outside of the state and inside as well. Man, there is a lot of opiate addiction across the state, and especially or often in rural areas, there's a lot of this. I was surprised by the epidemic and how it's devastated communities and families. And so, if you're detached from this or you feel like you're detached, you may not be as detached as you think you are. It may be a little closer to home than you think. Let's be wise as we're, taking care of our injuries and doing our things with any painkillers we have. Obviously, there's been a ton of education and progress on that. I love the emotional thing that Sean spoke about not burying it. I think this is harmful in any intimate relationship when we bury painful things that we're keeping as secret or harboring ill feelings. It's just not good. Don't bury it. We need to be honest with each other. You're not perfect. I know that every one of my listeners is not perfect, even though I love you. And you should know, and you do know, that I'm not perfect as well, nor is anyone in my family. We are fellow travelers. Let's uplift each other no matter the roads that we travel, no matter our circumstances. Let's put our arm around a brother, raise him up, help him up, even when they are struggling with ugly, damaging addiction. Again, Sean, I appreciate your friendship, of course, and your courage in coming on to share your story. I hope this helps someone out there.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Us Podcast with Jeff Burningham. Please help us grow by leaving a rating and review and subscribing at your favorite podcast platform. Also, tell your friends and share on social media. See you again next week.
Sally,
Jeff,
I heard you jumped out of a plane. Is that true?
that's true.
You can hear all about it on Under Our Bed. Sally skydiving in Dubai.
It's hard to believe, but it's true.
It is true. We have a podcast called Under Our Bed. We hope you'll check it out. Subscribe in 2022. We talk about important and funny things.
Yes, like skydiving, like when someone you love dies.
Yeah.
Lots
which is
of-
sad.
We cover
We
the
cover
gamut.
life.
Yeah.
If you're interested about life, if you want to hear a couple talk about life, come join us, Jeff and Sal, Under Our Bed.
You will love it, I guarantee.
Love you, Sal.
Love you too.
Good night.
Good night.